years not leave is granted. So the question now is that Part 3, 4 and 5 stand part. That's the debate on clauses 31 to 144B in Schedules 1 and 2, and the call goes to the Honourable Phil Goff.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I think it makes sense to talk about the three parts together because it combines Scheme 1, which deals with the veterans that who served before April 1974, plus those who served at Keenon as support for the medical team, and Squadron 41 up to 1975. The Part 4 deals with Scheme 2, which deals with veterans since that time, and the reason for separating that out is because of the introduction of accident compensation in April 1974, and the whole emphasis of those who have served since 1974-75 is on rehabilitation, getting the person back to the position that they were in before they sustained the injury that led them to require that support. And Part 5 deals with elements that are common to both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. But I just want to comment on the discussion that we've had, because it's not what we agree on, which is most of this bill, that concerns me. It's where we disagree. And where we disagree is that somehow we think that when you set up a law commission to independently analyse and make recommendations about how we treat our veterans, there has to be a good reason if we depart from their recommendation. And Mr Chairman, there is no good reason why we should depart from their recommendation relating to the payment of all of the benefits that go with the veterans' pension. What effectively we've had happen here is that the Law Commission, supported by the veterans, supported by the Royal New Zealand Returned and Services Association, recommended that veterans should get a level of benefit because they have served our country. And what this national government has done is cut the amount of money that the Law Commission and the RSA both recommended should go to our veterans. This is about cutting support for our veterans. And you know what it's about, Mr Chairman? It's about a miserable $7.4 million. That is what it would take to give our veterans the full entitlement that the RSA and the Law Commission said they should have. This is penny pinching. This is miserable. This is mean. In 100 years since the First World War, as we mark that centenary, this government marks itself out as being so miserable that it's going to take $7.4 million away from the veterans that the Law Commission and the RSA and the veterans believe that they are entitled to. And I haven't heard one valid argument in this whole debate from the National Party to justify doing that. $7.4 million. You know, they're spending twice as that amount of money in one conference, the Small Developing Islands Conference in Samoa next month. Are our veterans less important than that? They're spending $30 million on Rio Tinto, a foreign multinational. Are our veterans who sacrificed for our country less important than the money that they're prepared to put into a foreign multinational company? They spent $150 million in legal fees on hocking off our assets that many of our veterans came back from the war to build up. Like my father-in-law, worked on the hydro dams at Mangakino and Aratiatia. $150 million in legal fees to lawyers to hock off the assets that we New Zealanders own, but they can't spend $7.4 million to give our veterans what the Law Commission said, after due consultation, after careful analysis, said our veterans were entitled to. This bill, in this form, cuts the entitlements that our veterans should have got if the Law Commission's recommendations and the RSA's recommendations were followed. And I haven't heard a single argument to justify why we should be penny pinching on our veterans as we commemorate in this centenary year all of those who have died, all of those who have given service, and all of those who have sacrificed for our country. I think that, Mr. Chairman, is pathetic. In terms of the parts in front of us, Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Phil Goff.
In terms of the parts in front of us, we've got, first of all, Scheme 1 that will deal with those veterans who served prior to 1974-75. And basically, what we have tried to do in this part of the bill is to preserve the entitlements that those older veterans from the Second World War, from Korea, from Malaya, from Malaysia and Vietnam are entitled to. And those entitlements are good entitlements. I don't think there's anybody in this House that would deny the right to those entitlements by our veterans. Entitlements such as travel costs associated with treatment and long-term hospital care, a disablement pension that people get in addition to their veterans' pension, taking into account the level of disablement that they have suffered, weekly income compensation, retirement lump sum, entitlements for spouses and bursaries for children. I think all of those are important entitlements. I think some of them are quite reasonable entitlements. I don't think they're more generous than what other veterans in similar countries like Canada, Australia, the United States or the United Kingdom are getting, but they're entitlements that should be there, and we stand by maintaining those entitlements and lifting them above the level that they were once set at. Mr. Chairman, in terms of the second part, which relates to the post-Vietnam War veterans, that is designed to take into account the changes that were brought about by the Accident Compensation Scheme. Before we had the Accident Compensation Scheme, the pension for veterans effectively was compensation for those who had suffered accidents. Now we need to ensure that there's a complementarity between the ACC payments and those received by war veterans, and not just a complementarity, but to ensure that there is a margin over and above the entitlements that war veterans get, because there should be that margin, because these people are people who have suffered their injuries in service to their country, Mr. Speaker. So there is a top-up to preserve the additional support provided to veterans under the 1954 Act, over and above that available to other New Zealanders, and it will ensure that all Scheme 2 veterans receive the same amount of compensation whether or not their accident compensation claim was accepted. I think that's important. I think it's important that we have moved to focus on rehabilitation and restoration to pre-injury capability to the maximum extent possible. The assistance provided to veterans is about incentivising wellness and using rehabilitation as a way of leading to other assistance that might be available. I think one of the important changes that are made in Scheme 2 is in relation to the lump sum payment rate. They'll be set at the equivalent payable under the ACC scheme plus an additional 20%. And I think it's also important that those that are who are terminally ill can get a lump sum payment brought forward as a way of acknowledging that their terminal illness is in most instances related to the service that they have given. So a veteran who's entitled to a disablement pension can elect to suspend payment of that pension for a period of up to 12 months and receive a lump sum payment equivalent to the aggregate of the pension payable at the maximum rate for the 12-month period. That was a change that was made in the Select Committee. I think it's an appropriate change. I think the concept of this legislation, based on the Law Commission, of having a scheme that maintains the entitlement for our older veterans and brings our new veterans into a space where there is a focus on rehabilitation, is the right approach. So if it's good for this House to follow the recommendations of the Law Commission in the fundamentals of this scheme, why is it that the National Party insists on departing from the recommendations of the Law Commission in terms of cutting the benefits that are available to people who have served? It is, frankly, Mr. Chairman, unacceptable to this side of the House, and I had hoped that it would be unacceptable to the Maori Party that our veterans would be denied that lump sum payment, $5,700, to enable the family to meet the funeral costs of the veterans. And I understand this was the amendment that I had moved was supported by the Maori Party. Mr Flavel will speak for himself, but I understand that, Mr Chairman... Mr Chairman, yeah, just to finish off, I'll only be 1 minute. I understand,
I'll
Mr.
decide
Chairman.
that. Honourable Phil Goff.
Thank you, and a very good decision, Mr Chairman. I understand that pressure was put on the Maori Party by the National Party that if they weren't to support the government's position on this bill, then the bill would not proceed, certainly during the life of this Parliament. If that is the case, Mr Chairman, that is quite unacceptable. I regret the fact that the Maori Party is no longer supporting what the RSA and the veterans have asked for and the Law Commission recommended, but Mr Flavel will no doubt comment on why there has been a change of heart on the part of the Maori Party. If they had not changed their view, then the votes would have been equally 61-61, and we could have, I think, negotiated a reasonable solution for the veterans. I think, well, the calculation and the whip can confirm it was that it would have been a tied vote if the Maori Party had supported Labour on this. 60-60, okay, it's like 2020 vision. 60-60. It is regrettable that the government has used its position to prevent a fair deal being reached for the veterans. And I've just got this one challenge, and it might go to Mr Flavel, or it might go to the National Party, or it might go to Mr Dunn. Why is it, it's a simple question, why is it that the recommendations of the Law Commission to be a little more generous to veterans has been dropped by this government when the cost was small, the cost was affordable, and the case that could be made for the veterans gaining entitlement to that small extra benefit was clear and overwhelmingly supported by the veterans? Why is it that in 2014, 100 years out from the start of the Great War, that we couldn't have given that little bit of extra to the veterans? Words are cheap. It would have been much better if we could have backed up our expressions of gratitude and thanks to our veterans by giving them something, a small something, that would have made a difference for them and their families. That question's hanging there, Mr Chairman, waiting for a member of the government or a party supporting the government to answer why it was not affordable to implement the recommendation of the Law Commission.
Kia ora, Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. Tēnā tātou katoa i tēnei rā. O tira i tēnei wiki, te wiki o